letting me give her a scratch.
Oh,
So
there were scratches.
building up
Scratches and
to,
foods are like.
so
Yeah, I'm sorry. Did you miss a few scratches? Did I take those away from you?
Maybe just squeeze in a little
Yeah,
bit if we can.
maybe
Better
also, I think it's better on the camera.
Yeah.
There. I have to remember that too. Is a volume turned all the way up?
it should be.
Because I didn't. I used it and I might not have turned it all up.
Poor guy.
Here, do you
He's practicing for the monastery.
You gotta use the TV remote for it.
See,
Did it work?
She's still muted.
can y'all hear us?
She's muted.
She said, you can
Yeah.
hear us, right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Good morning. Welcome to Great Tree Zen Women's Temple. Our speaker this morning is Eido Phoebe Reinhart. But first, we'd like to have the opening sutra.
An unsurpassed,
Penetrating
penetrating,
and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to, remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's teaching. And now a brief message about Dana. In Buddhism, when Zen practitioners share their understanding of the teachings and practice, it is offered freely as a practice of Dana Paramita. Dana is a Pali word that means generosity or to give freely, and this practice is done without expectation of getting something in return. This is the spirit of speaking about the Dharma. Other ways to practice Dana is to offer support to those who share the teachings, to support places of spiritual practice, and to give without judgment or expectation when opportunities arise. Those who share the teachings at Great Tree do so on a Dana basis. Please support their practice by giving what you can. Phoebe, where would you like your Dana to go?
Excuse me, what was the question?
Where would you like your Dana to go?
Oh, it can go to Great Tree.
Thank you.
So isn't that question asked in the letter you send out?
Pardon?
Isn't that question asked in the letter you send out?
Yes,
Oh, but she just didn't answer it.
I didn't send the letter.
Oh, I think we need to talk. Sorry.
Eido Phoebe Reinhart was ordained by receiving transmission from Rev Shohaku Okumura. She participated in 2 3-month angos in Japan and is recognized by Soto Shu as Koku Sai Fukyo Shi. She recently retired after working for 50 years as a physical therapist. She lives in Minneapolis, has 2 adult sons and 2 granddaughters. Welcome, Phoebe.
Thank you. I've been asked to actually read a chapter from this book, which Shoju Muller from France did several weeks ago. So we'll see how that goes. But first, I would like to put this in context. I would just like to read to you the editor's preface. So this book is called Adding Beauty to Brocade. And the subtitle, Expressing the Reality of Life Through the 4 Embracing Actions. And so what the first 100 pages is a translation and interpretation by Reverend Okumura on this fascicle called Bodhisattva Shishobo, for embracing actions of the Bodhisattva. The editor's preface is written by Hoku Karnagus. And she says, 5 years ago, Senshinji community undertook to put together a collaborative book, Boundless Vows, Endless Practice. That is this book. In honor of our 50th anniversary. And now we're here again, this time to commemorate 2 decades of practice at Senshinji in the particular style of our family and lineage. In this volume, we offer our various perspectives on the teachings found in the Bodhisattva Shishobo. As in the previous volume, we focus on the life and practice of the Bodhisattva in the world of the here and now, rather than offering an abstract or academic work. Our writing comes from our day-to-day experience of practice and speaks to readers as they also navigate this one unified reality moment by moment. We are all, the authors are all first or second generation Dharma descendants of Senshinji's founder, Shohaku Okumura, and our chapters all respond in some way to his opening teachings about the 4 embracing actions, which are giving, or dana, or offering, loving speech, beneficial action, and identity action. Some of us live the lives of householders and are holding down jobs and raising families in addition to carrying out our Dharma teaching. Others are engaged in some form of residential practice, living in a temple and spending all day, every day, facilitating the practice of our Sangha and ourselves. We come from many countries, including South America, North America, Europe, and Japan, and speak a variety of languages. We have varying degrees of comfort and experience in writing for publication, and for some, English is a second or third language. When I first contacted my brothers and sisters to invite them to participate, I told them they were welcome to write in their first language rather than in English if they felt best able to say what they wanted to say in that way. Thus, this book contains Dharma teachings in English, German, Italian, and Spanish. Authors did their own translations into English, except where noted. As I did with our 15th anniversary volume, I've tried to preserve the author's individual voices in their chapters, even where the English may be quirky or unusual. As long as the text was readable and understandable, I've opted not to edit with a heavy hand in order to make it possible for readers who know the writers to say to themselves, "Ah, I can just hear her saying that." This book would not have been possible without the linguistic expertise of Sagan Hartmeyer, who edited all of the non-English chapters as well as their translations. The value of having a retired teacher of languages as part of the ordained Sangha can't be overestimated. In some instances, brothers and sisters helped each other with writing, translation, and final tuning. Just another example of the ways in which the Sanshin Network is learning to create partnerships and work together to share our practice of the Dharma. And there are 16 authors. And my chapter is about offering. And actually, Shoju's chapter was also of that category. The emphasis on mine is a little bit about how receiving is also an offering. And so I call it Takuhatsu in daily life. Does everyone know what Takuhatsu is? Anyway, here's a picture of people in Japan getting ready to go on Takuhatsu, which is a traditional old way of begging. Anyway, so part of my chapter and thinking is about how is this relevant to us today in this country at this time? And what can we, is there a way for us to practice that? And what would that mean? So when something is offered, there's a possibility that it will be received. However, does offering depend on being received? Can our offering be unconditional and free of expectations? Can our receiving also be unconditional and free of expectations or obligations? Can it be pure? Whenever we are not greedy or covetous, we are offering, giving. Can our giving and receiving be free of greed and covetousness? If it cannot be pure, is its value negated? Although we may intend our actions to be pure, is it actually possible? Should we not even bother if our intentions cannot be pure? I value self-reflection and discernment, but there is a temptation, even with our best intentions, for our actions to be tainted by some ego-centered desire. It can be as simple as wanting to be a good person with pure intentions. When we see we have failed at this, how does it affect our generosity? I propose that we generously accept our own limitations, not expect our intentions to be pure and perfect. We can act generously anyway without giving ourselves much thought or weight, as all that personal discernment is often ego-based and does not necessarily help us. So it can keep us focused on me and my intentions instead of moving outward with our action to the other who is in need. The need of the other may be material, emotional, or spiritual. It may be the need for the Dharma, the teaching. Can we offer the Dharma without holding back and being limited by our own awareness of how imperfect we are, without asking, who am I to be offering the Dharma if I cannot do it with pure, unselfish intention? What is the alternative? To withhold what the other needs from us because what we have to offer is not pure enough or may be tainted by our hypocrisy. Therefore, we think it's not worth doing, or we might. Have you ever kept yourself from acting because of your awareness of the impurity of your motives? Our awareness of our flaws can be immobilizing if we let it be. We will find, if we look closely, that it's not possible to be pure in our motives. We need to learn to be more focused on offering and receiving than on our own motives. Some of us can always find something to feel guilty about. One might think that this is only a Catholic tendency, but it is really everywhere, including in our Zen practice. Lots of opportunities to feel guilty. I can offer an example from my own life and practice as a Catholic in the 70s and 80s. I became a Roman Catholic as an adult, following the spiritual path of Thomas Merton, for whom I gained great wisdom. And I learned through prayer, at least I thought I did. My prayer was not for anything except union with God. That sounds fairly pure, but my intention was still to get something for me. I became rather scrupulous about finding fault in myself and going to confession. I was always looking for impurity in my intentions so I could confess them. Thus, my prayer and my spiritual life was very ego-centered, more than it was God or other-centered. I entered a Christian monastery where I lived for a year, and I noticed this tendency of mine became even more pronounced and more apparent, at least to me. I thought my motivation for going to the monastery was to serve others and to live for God. But there was so much of me in my continual discernment that there was not much room for anyone else. I became more and more aware of my preoccupation with myself and saw that while intending to live a life for God and others, I couldn't seem to escape this tendency while living in the monastic container. This was one of the insights motivating me to leave that community. My introspection had almost become pathological. The decision was very difficult and even quite traumatic for me, because I had been visiting the monastery for years before I entered and had given up many things of the world, including relationships, in order to be there. This community was my family, and I felt very bereft and lost after I left it. But I could see that I was not psychologically healthy there. I didn't know the answer, but I was very aware of experiencing longing and hope, held out hope that I would one day find the way and place for me. At this time, I still expected that to be a religious community. In the meantime, before I even went to the monastery, I had started practicing Zen. At least I used the Zen posture for my prayer. I think what I was doing was Zazen or Zazen-like, in that it was primarily with the intention of opening up and surrendering. At that time, I thought of it as surrendering to God's will or becoming one with God. This eventually evolved into a wordless, receptive, existential posture of just being present. I was influenced by several important texts, including The Cloud of Unknowing, written in the 14th century, and Practicing the Presence of God, written in the 17th century. So when I was in this posture of prayer, I would, if I were to describe what it was, I would say exactly that I was practicing the presence of God. I wasn't, or I was wallowing in it, or just enjoying it, or being aware of it. So the point of sitting down and being quiet was basically to be aware of it. Eventually, I realized that what I was seeking was already there, and God was not separate from me, that I did not need to strive for this unity because it was already there. God included me and I included God. There was no place I needed to go with my body, my mind, or my heart. I could just sit and enjoy, savor, cherish, be aware of that oneness that was. This also led to the experience and practicing of gratitude. You may ask what all this personal history has to do with my subject here, but this gradual spiritual awakening led to an evolving understanding of giving and receiving. We also have many Buddhist teachings about this, including our meal chant, which says, giver and receiver and gift are one, or empty. Can this be so? Can we actually experience and actualize this, not just believe it? Can we know it from our experience? We also say in the meal chant, we reflect on the effort that brought us this food and consider how it comes to us. We reflect on our virtue and practice and whether we are worthy of this offering. We regard greed as the obstacle to freedom of mind. We regard this meal as medicine to sustain our life. For the sake of enlightenment, we now receive this food. In the same way, every encounter is one of giving and receiving, and there is no difference between giver, receiver, and gift, because we are not separate. No doubt we do get a good feeling from giving, but this is a byproduct and should not be our primary motivation. If that is why we give, then it is not a genuine and generous offering. It is a means to an end, a means to feeling good, looking for good feelings for me. Even though we may experience that good feeling, is it possible to give without that expectation? Can I just let that go? Can that feeling just be a byproduct? And can we manage not to give it much weight? After all, such good feelings are very transient and fleeting, not really very life-sustaining. So let's not value that too much. Maybe we do not need to value it all. maybe we can give and receive without expectation, without greed, and without covetousness. And this also means letting go of the outcome. So when we give or receive, we don't actually know what the outcome of that is going to be. But our offering is an offering, regardless of the outcome. Receiving is also an offering, if we can do it without expectation and without selfishness. For example, the expectation that I must reciprocate, that the giving and receiving needs to be equal. If you give me something, perhaps my first response is something like, oh, you shouldn't have, very American or Minnesotan. Or I must reciprocate as soon as possible. If so, I cannot just be gratefully grateful. I cannot accept your gift without feeling like I owe you one also. This kind of thinking is really not being willing to accept the gift without conditions. This is even more difficult for us than it is to give without expectation. I think giving and receiving are virtuous practices to be done just for their sake and not for any secondary benefit or guilt. I call this Takuhatsu in daily life. I don't need to be good at it to advocate it. I need this admonition as much as anyone. It is so difficult for us to receive without feeling the need to even the score. We cannot allow other people to give more to us than we have given to them. When written down in black and white, I think that sounds silly, but that is what we tend to do and feel. And I just have a recent example in my own life that I have not been feeling very well, and a friend offered to clean my house. And my first reaction was, oh, no, you don't need to do that. You've got your plate full, you have your own health issues, you have this, you have that, and all the second guessing about her motives, what she can do, what she can't do, which is none of my business, really. Actually, I felt, because I've been advocating this for many years, just being willing to receive, and here I found myself automatically rejecting her offering and making all kinds of excuses for why she shouldn't do this. And in fact, I said, well, I usually pay someone to do that. And for me, that was a way of, and that's true, I often pay someone to clean for me. And I'd never before had someone offer to do it as a favor, as an offering. And so in a way, I'm in that class of people who's accustomed to paying for what I want, what I need. And then there's this different feeling about it. There shouldn't be, because it's still an offering, but when we buy something, we have a different, we tend not to be as grateful, for one thing. Anyway, I regretted that, and I contacted her again and said if she was still offering, I would love to have accept her offering, and she's coming this afternoon. And so just to talk a little bit about what I mean by Takuhatsu in daily life, I'd like to share a little bit about my own experience with Takuhatsu in Japan. We did this practice several times in the old traditional way. That meant dressing in a particular way to beg, as monks have done for centuries. We wear robes in a particular way, hand covers, leg covers, straw hats that cover our eyes, and we carry bowls and handbells. We stop at various homes and businesses, ring the bells, and chant. Someone may or may not come to put something in our bowls. In any case, we chant and move on. This is an ancient practice which can still be carried out in some places in Japan because people understand it, and they often feel honored to have this opportunity to give an offering. And I think that's significant because even though that's a formal way that they have established and recognized that, it is still true in our lives that people often feel honored by being able to give to us. And we should not refuse it. So at the during this 3-month ango, Hoito Suzuki, Shunryu Suzuki's son, was our leader. And he gave a talk about what was the point or value for Westerners practicing this um, ancient practice? And his primary point was, we need to practice interdependence so we experience and internalize this reality, not just think about it as a concept. So when we go out and we open our hands for an offering and are inviting people to give to us, we are manifesting and actualizing, personifying the truth of our interdependence, because we need others, and this is a way of practicing that. He went so far as to say that we need to practice receiving in order to live a pure life. This is not a common admonition, but one we should take to heart. We say we believe it, but do we really? If we believe this, why is it so difficult to receive from others? We not only need to believe this, but know this from experience. And so this Takuhatsu experience led me to value and more deeply ponder the teaching, and particularly how one might translate this teaching in our lives in the West. We don't go about begging here, since no one would understand this practice. Some people do, but we aren't going to do that. It would just seem odd, eccentric, and maybe even offensive. What I would like you to consider is how we can practice Takuhatsu in our daily life. What that means to me is being willing to receive and give without expectations or conditions. Receiving is also an offering. In response to receiving, we express our gratitude. And that is an offering to the person who is giving. And it is an opportunity for them to experience that and receive that, and for them to give. We may also feel some accountability for using the gifts wisely and responsibly because someone gave it to us. When doing Takuhatsu in Japan, there is an implicit response or promise by the receiver to continue our practice so as to be worthy of the offering. That promise also includes using the gift wisely and being grateful. Besides the difficulty we have in receiving, we have even more difficulty asking for help. And we must cultivate this as a practice so we continue to deeply realize that we truly are interdependent. We are not independent as we like to think we are. Not only are we not independent, but it is arrogant of us to insist on that understanding and not recognize and practice receiving from others. I suggest not only being willing to receive, but also increasing these practice opportunities by asking others for what we need. This could be anything: help in the yard, help with a project, emotional or spiritual help. It can be simple as deciding that when someone offers to pay for my cup of coffee, I accept it gratefully and do not refuse it. Or in last week, if someone offers to clean my house, I don't say, no, please don't do that. And she was so pleased that I was willing to accept her offering. You know, in some cultures, it's very offensive to refuse an offering. And we in the West are very, very accustomed to refusing this. And but if you think about how it feels subtly when you've offered something and someone refuses it, it doesn't really feel great. You don't really feel taken care of. Like the other person, like me, I was making all these plans and excuses for why she couldn't do it. That was second guessing her. That was not my place to do that. And that's the kind of thing we do. It's so hard for us to just say, thank you, I love that. And so many of us have jobs and income so that we can buy what we need. So I buy things with my money, and then I own them so I can use them as I please. Because I've worked for what I have, there is no need for gratitude or accountability. Even in Zen centers, we sometimes think we are buying services. We pay for retreats or classes, and therefore sometimes think we have the right to complain about what is offered, including the food, as if it was a whole restaurant. Or accommodations, to complain about the accommodations as if it was a hotel. Yes, we have to pay something because this offering costs something. But the most important thing about paying something is to see that it's not in exchange for a commodity. It's an offering of gratitude for what is offered. And in a sense, it doesn't depend on whether we like what was offered. We appreciate that it was offered. It's so much easier for us to give than receive that we are reluctant to accept, receive, or ask for support. Receiving can make us feel dependent, vulnerable, obligated, powerless, and even ashamed if we are in need of help. We don't like to need or be dependent, and we don't realize we already are, and therefore have reason to be constantly grateful. We actually need to learn to feel dependent and vulnerable. And to learn this, we need to practice it. I worked in home care for a long time as a physical therapist, and most of my clients were elderly, and some of them were quite resentful that they were so dependent now on others, including family members. And sometimes I would try to convince them that this was an opportunity they were providing for the others who were serving them, an opportunity for them to give, and which it is. And if one looks at it that way, and the other thing is, like, the time in your life, we're all going to get sick and decline and die. And the closer we get to that, the more apparent it is that we need help others. And could we maybe just be grateful for that and let them give to us instead of resisting it and being resentful? My experience in the Catholic monastery also taught me a lot about giving and receiving, because this community lived on alms and was therefore dependent upon benefactors for its existence. What this meant in daily life was that we would receive donations of food, and we felt a responsibility to use them and not waste them. That could mean dropping everything right now to process bushels of beans. It also meant making meals from what was available rather than going up for whatever we wanted, going shopping for whatever we wanted. It also meant feeling some responsibility for a life worthy of this support. Concretely, in this situation, this included things like praying for others, responding to letters, welcoming others, being grateful. The nuns didn't work for a living, and they didn't save money, so they were willing to be vulnerable in that way. And even medical needs were dependent on charity. There was no private ownership. It was quite a freeing experience. And I think that we can incorporate some of these practices or virtues in our daily lives. And here are some simple ways to do that. Accepting graciously what is offered to us, not saying no when offered something, remembering and practicing that there is no difference between giver, receiver, and gift. And in a lot of this talk, we were talking about no difference between giver and receiver, but also the gift, whatever it is, whether it's tangible or otherwise, is not ours to give, actually. So we don't need to own it in that way. We could feel some accountability for how we use resources, including those that we have purchased ourselves. We could be grateful that we have the resources to buy what we need. Being grateful for all that is given, reflecting on the effort that has provided these resources, and considering how they have come to us, even if they are things we purchase. Be grateful to the store clerk who is helping you. It's not just a job. This person is serving you, and it's an offering to be grateful for, not to be taken for granted. Our granted is an offering. Our gratitude is an offering. Let us make it explicit so the person actually experiences our gratitude. It could change that person's day or that person's life. Remember that every encounter is an opportunity to practice offering and gratitude. Therefore, we need to provide opportunities for others to give by asking for help, even if we don't need help, just to practice interdependence. We can take advantage of our frailties and limitations, especially as we age, as these are opportunities for others to practice generosity. Let us not miss the opportunity to give someone else a chance to practice generosity and for us to practice gratitude. Let us consider even making the effort to create these opportunities by asking others to help us. It is all right to need and depend on others. It is not all right, but it is virtuous, and it is reality manifesting. Whether we know it or not, we are interdependent. I don't know where I went, but I can't see me, but amen. Those are my words for today, and I welcome your responses. And I'll see if I can get myself back up there.
We can see you.
Oh, can you? Okay, fine. Then it doesn't matter. I don't need to see me.
Well,
Any,
I have a comment. When you were talking about Takuhatsu, it reminded me of, my experience of feeling uncomfortable about it because, the discomfort of receiving, and thinking that you weren't giving anything. And then our teacher, pointed out that us Westerners had problems with this, and that it was because we didn't understand that our job was to give the Dharma by doing our practice, by sharing our practice. And, it was manifested in the chanting of Ho, which means Dharma, or chanting the Heart Sutra or the Kanongyo. But I've thought about this a lot because, it seems as if giving our practice is not enough, because we never feel equal to it. But I think there's a great deal of value in appreciating the fact that that is bodhisattva practice, to just give freely when asked, and be aware of when it's needed, and just share the Dharma without expecting anything, which is also difficult because when we share the Dharma, we want people to understand it the way we do. So anyway, there's that aspect of it too, that there is, there is the acknowledgement, I think, that we have to have as bodhisattvas, that our practice is a giving, and that it's enough.
yes.
And our practice, I think, means our effort. It doesn't mean our perfection.
Mhm.
I heard a story one time about when I was a kid, about this convent that only lived on the food that they were given. And one year they went for a whole year without salt because nobody gave them salt. And we used to say, oh, that would be terrible. We were kids,
I was just gonna, oh, sorry, go ahead, Troy.
Okay, thanks, Deborah. Good to see you. I was gonna say I really appreciate this a reminder, the importance of receiving, and what was kind of coming up for me is just receiving, also kind of you were saying energetic and or emotional, spiritual support. And kind of I'm not in it right now, but I've been in the mental health field, and you know, I just see so much of how burnout is such a thing, or like what's called sometimes compassion fatigue with people who work in that field, because I think a big part of it, there's I think a lot to it. There's kind of systemic issues, but I think a big part of it too is this constant giving without the sometimes the recognition or the practice and the ability to also receive that kind of care and support. And it reminds me of like these practices that we do sometimes of metta and tonglen, and how we always, step one is always starting with ourselves and kind of giving that to ourselves, which is also kind of receiving that in a way. And then also as we extend out, opening up to receiving that from others, and how it's so easy for me to kind of lose that and skip myself and leave myself out and kind of think like, no, you know, it's selfish or whatever. And how then I'm not able to actually give, you know, or what I'm giving is not what I want to be giving. Instead of giving compassion or whatever, I'm giving maybe resentment, or I'm giving exhaustion to the people around me, you know, when I'm not also receiving. And it's just something that is so easy for me to do, and it's such a pattern. So I just really appreciate your emphasis on that.
Deborah wanted to say something.
Well, we'll add to what Trey said. I feel that lately. I'm a mental health professional too, and just aware of that burnout. And then I come to my patients not full-heartedly, and which makes the burnout worse. So I'm really working on trying to be really present, wholehearted in the moment, and it does help with the burnout. But what I was going to just say is, I mean, I think we all struggle with the giving and receiving, and something I struggle with lately is getting up the nerve to ask and then being told no. You know, then asking someone else and being told no, we're something pretty simple. But so that's a challenge for me lately, you know, to not feel bad about myself, or not feel like, oh gosh, like what's her name, Blanche Dubois from Streetcar Named Desire. I don't know if you have thoughts about that.
I have two adult sons, and you know, you can imagine, well, one of them has two kids, but even with those couple without kids, you know, life is very demanding in those years when you're trying to make a living and do so many things. And sometimes I ask them for something and I do get the answer no. And it could be offensive, but usually I try to understand why there's a no. And it's usually because they're overwhelmed. And at that particular moment, just can't say yes to one more thing. They're already experiencing this burnout from multiple directions. And then mom comes along and said, well, could you please do one more thing? Now, they could be a little more gracious about it. I agree with that. But but also, I'm also have some compassion for why they're feeling like they can't give what I'm asking. Why is that? What is it about their lives that they feel like they can't do it? You know? Then I think, well, that's kind of sad. Not just for me, but for them.
Right. We can feel entitled as mothers.
Hi, good morning. My name's Chloe. I've joined you all a couple of times before and feel very grateful to be able to take the camera on for once, feeling more comfortable. So yeah, grateful for this community, and I also am a baby social worker, as we call it in school, and I'm in my last semester. So I definitely relate to what some folks were sharing, Trey and Deborah, along the lines of, yeah, I found myself asking for that help this week when there can be a lot that comes up with that. Of asking for extra help from my therapist, a second session, and that's okay. And so just working through that, and then also being able to be present with my clients the following day because I was able to nourish that part of me when in the past I wasn't able to do that. So the coolest part for me right now in my journey of learning this new way of living has been just being with folks and also reminding them in the therapeutic setting that they too get to fill their cup first. They too get to have that centering to be able to bring it back to them and to care for them as we care for others. Because the women that I work with at my internship oftentimes talk about caring for their children first, or needing to do this or this or this first, because sometimes it's easier to put that focus out away from ourselves and from caring for ourselves. So that definitely resonated with me today, and I appreciate all of your words.
I had a couple of comments. Thank you for your discussion and teaching this morning. As you were speaking, I was thinking about two things in particular. One was when I lived in New York. I was living in the Bronx, and I've been there for a long time. And I remember how when I first moved there, I would see people outside the subways, and they would be asking for money, or they would have something set up that had a card that would say something about themselves and express a need or a desire to get money or to get something, and I remember how struck I was by all of that when I first was seeing it, and then over time I just kind of like head down, keep moving ahead, don't make eye contact, that kind of thing, where you just kind of blocking it out, you don't want to see it. And then I would also encounter people who I would notice would be coming toward me with a specific intent, and I would get so used to that. I know what's going to happen. Like I could anticipate it. I know what's going to happen. I know there's going to be a pitch. I know there's going to be a story, and then I know there's going to be an ask. And I've got stuff to do. And sometimes I would get stopped, and I would have those exchanges, and it's kind of that became sort of my MO. And then one day, I saw someone coming in that direction to do that, and I thought, oh, here we go. And instead of asking for something, there was no ask. Person just wanted to talk. And I stopped and I sort of had this conversation, and he told a really funny story that kind of made my day. And I just thought, he just gave me something. I thought he was coming to ask me for something, and he gave me something. And I thought that's a wonderful thing. And it just brought me back to this attention that I've got to kind of reorient my mindset about all of this. I've got to find a way to put that in a better balance. And the second thing that reminded me of when you were talking was years before that, when I was in college, I had gone to New York to do we had a January term in college, and in the January term, you could do anything you wanted to. So I went to Union Theological Seminary on the Upper West Side, and one of the first things that we were asked to do, this was in the 80s, and there was a chronic problem with homelessness. We were asked just to go out on the streets and spend time talking to people and getting their stories. And I was right here on my desk is the notebook that I have page after page after page of encounters with people who told their stories. And I looked back through that the other day and thought, that's a gift that they gave me that I still have. And I wondered what happened to those people. and I hope they're okay. So it just put me in mind to help me put things in perspective, and this talk brought that back to me. Thank you.
Thank you. That is a common dilemma, and especially in cities, including my city. And I've, some people give, some people don't. Some people have a little package ready to give to people of, necessities. But the looking people in the eye and not giving is a very difficult thing. And I noticed that there are some people on the street who are asking, who, whether they get anything or not, will look you in the eye and wave or say, God bless you or something. And it feels very ingenuous to not acknowledge them, and say, well, hi, have a good day. How can I say have a good day? But anyway, acknowledge them and not just ignore them, even by just looking them in the eye and smiling,
The story that Brian just told about the man who wanted to just talk and not ask for something, seemed that in spite of not asking for something tangible, clearly he could see that Brian was interested and maybe enjoying his story. And for someone who's lonely, that can be a real gift, even though he initiated it. It was an exchange anyway. It wasn't one-sided.
Mm-hmm. I have one more little story to share, and that is, it's about the anyway, accepting help or asking for help. I some decades ago, when my kids were little, I had some pretty invasive knee surgery, and so I couldn't do very much. I was non-wavering, and I was in crutches, and I was usually the person who did the laundry and the cooking and this and that, and I also worked part-time, but I couldn't work then, and I wasn't much help at home. And my husband worked full-time, and now he had to do the cooking, the cleaning, the laundry, and everything. And I suggested that I reached out and asked for some help. At that time, I was a practicing Catholic and then practitioner. So I left a note in both places saying, here's an opportunity to practice generosity if you want to. And I got quite a great response. And basically what I was asking for was meals, some meals. And my husband felt very uncomfortable, and he said, I can do it. We don't need that. I said, I know you can do it, and I know you would. But the thing is, you don't have to do it all by yourself. And the experience was really lovely in terms of community building and relationships with people who decided to offer us some food. And I'm just talking about even one meal, can be such a relief if you don't have to come home and cook and deal with your disabled wife and 2 little kids. I mean, he was really able to appreciate it and enjoy it, but he couldn't ask for it. And he thought that we sort of didn't have a right to it because we could do it ourselves. And this is a very common attitude. But by doing it, we all had a wonderful family experience, including some gratitude. So.
I think that's a very prevalent thing in our culture, because I was talking to somebody yesterday about when I sewed my first Roxu, and I didn't know how to sew, and so I was kind of learning, and it was a very frustrating thing for me. But I clearly wasn't going to get finished in time, and I thought, well, I'll just do it next time, But then suddenly people started descending on me and taking parts of it and sewing them for me. And I remember thinking, oh no, I should be doing this myself, you know? And I had to, but Tomoe-san did. And I thought, oh, well, you know, I can't tell her not to help me. So, you know, and this was, I'd only been at Zen Center for about a year, you know, so I didn't know a lot of these people that were doing this. And I remember this big aha that I had, like, we don't live in a vacuum, that we live in an interdependent relationship. We need other people, you know? And this was like a big aha moment for me. And I would have never thought that I had that idea, oh, I have to do it myself, you know, until I just encountered that one thing, you know? So. Do you have any final remarks? Because we're getting pretty close to 11 here. 11 here, what time is it? 10 there, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Anything you want to say? Thank you.
Me? I don't have anything more to say.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. This is always a good, interesting subject.
Thank you.
May the merit of this practice
May the merit of this practice
benefit all beings
benefit all beings
and bring peace.
and bring peace.